Hello and welcome back to another episode of McClaren Performance, where today I want to talk about captains. Why is a captain so important? What makes a good captain, and how should they actually be chosen? Every great and successful team often has a well-known and defined leader. When I think about the Premier League and the captains that they've had, say like Roy Keane, Patrick Vieira, John Terry, Steven Gerrard and Vincent Kompany as well. They're all very well-defined, well-known leaders that ultimately made for successful teams as well. And the reason for that is because they are essential for these successful teams. Leadership in general is so important for sports, for business, for anything. And the reasons for that can be seen throughout our, human evolution. Not to get too off track, but before there were football teams, there were people, groups of people trying to survive. And they adapted processes in which they could actually do that. And one of those processes was, of course, leadership. In order to survive, someone had to act first, someone had to point first, someone had to move first, and subsequently, other people then had to follow. That makes for a team, a group of people that then eventually acts as one whole. Groups that acted individually, made opposing individual choices, didn't survive. And those that created leaders did survive. And so we as humans and footballers today are a product of that. We're collaborative, we communicate and we work together. And that is helped by leadership and hierarchy. Something I touched on before, people are not isolated things. We react and respond and change due to people around us. There's so many great simple bits of research out there where you can see human behavior and choices change because of other people. In a group, others will willingly give wrong answers if there is a consistent minority around them also doing that as well. If you're walking down the street and looking to the sky, other people are going to do that as well, for no reason other than them being influenced by you. And that is us as individual people, bouncing around, being influenced by one another, changing in beliefs, in ideas, in behaviours, because of the things and the people around us. And that's what creates us, not our individual choices. There's no free will in that. We are influenced by everything. Our genetics, what we're born with, but also by the people around us, our environment. Those two things really, they shape us into what we are now. And as you can imagine, that can get really messy. So take a football team, for example, where, he or she does this, so then they copy that, but someone else does something else, and then others do that instead. A team can be messy like that, with people doing lots of different things for different reasons, and because of that, can lack cohesion. But with a captain, with a leader, all of that gets streamlined into one whole hierarchy. In my head, a team can look like this. It can look all over the place. It can be messy. And with that leadership, with that hierarchy, I see that line through it. That clear communication, that clear idea, that clear hierarchy to take all of that and streamline it into one thing. That's what a leader is to me. That's what a captain is to me. That's what they bring. And that is where the whole team act in line with the leadership group, and the leadership group act in line with the captain. A captain holds traits, values, qualities that through conformity, without people even realising, they attempt to then copy that. All subconsciously, because we have systems within us developed through, like we talked about, evolution, so we conform to groups and leadership in order for us to survive, to perform, to thrive, really. Ultimately, captains are important because if done right, a team will become its captain and will inherit the traits of that person. But in addition to that, they are the start of that line of communication throughout the entire team. So what they believe in, what they understand, what they act out, that becomes the start of a communication throughout the rest of the team, where everybody is cohesive and together with one message led by one person. So what is the ideal captain to make any of that work? So research has shown that captains are often picked based on their experience and their technical ability. But as we've discussed there, I don't think that's fully utilising how influential and important a captain is. You want traits in a captain that you want everyone in your team to have, to emulate and to try and reflect that. And in that, we all really know what an ideal captain is. There's a great book called Captain Class by Sam Walker, a book I've only ever really skimmed through, but in it there are 7 key traits of an elite captain. And what I want to do is go through those traits and keep in mind a captain who is considered probably the best captain within the Premier League that there has ever been, that being Roy Keane, because I think it's quite surprising how similar these traits are to what he supposedly had. So just in short, there's traits in there like doggedness, aggressiveness, does the thankless jobs, low-key democratic communication, passionate non-verbal displays, courage, and also emotional control. That to me is almost all, if not all, the traits you hear about from Roy Keane in his captaincy of Man United. And it's also no coincidence that he was then part of such a successful side, but also part of a side that more often than not reflected those traits as well. Like I said, you ultimately want a captain that thinks and behaves as you want the rest of the team to do as well. The closest to that working successfully in the Premier League at the moment, I think, is Jordan Henderson at Liverpool, who reflects those humble, hard-working traits that you want in your team. And you see that throughout really the whole Liverpool side. Liverpool are most often praised for their character and their likability. And I would guess that comes down a lot to Jordan Henderson and his leadership, how he has players reflecting himself and his values. And when we complain about teams not performing and complain about a lack of desire and want from players, I feel it almost always comes down to what I talked about before, which is that messy, not knowing your place within the team, and with that, a lot of conflicting values and ideas. We have a tendency again to look at players as these isolated things, as if they've chosen to be a certain way, when really they are a product of their culture and their environment. And in those cases, players don't need replacing. They don't need, kick up the arse. They need a clean slate, a true set of values and beliefs within the team for why and how they want to play. And then lastly, they need a captain and a leadership group to reflect those ideal behaviours. With all of that, especially having a captain as well, you then have that clarity and that organisation with the team, and ultimately resilience despite conceding goals and taking any other hits as well. But to start all that progress and improvement, how are you actually going to pick your captain? Since I started studying psychology and specifically going into sports psychology, I've done loads of research on hierarchy, on influence within football teams. Specifically, I've really been interested in measuring it. So measuring how influential a player is, but also measuring how influential other players within the team think a certain player is also. And with that measurement, you can kind of get a score for how influential or how high up in the hierarchy a certain player is. And with that, you can kind of map out exactly what the hierarchy is. And from that, see the 4 or 5 influential players, but also see from that who potentially your captain is. Now, I wouldn't say that by itself is a tool to use to pick captains. I go back to something that I think I heard a while ago about Rangnick saying that he wanted the players to pick a captain. I think it was Rangnick or someone like that. And I think that's a really interesting idea. I don't think it's the right idea. One way in which it's the right idea is that it's one thing I haven't quite mentioned yet, is that it's important to consider in a captain how influential that player is within the team, how much influence they actually have in swaying the ideas and opinions of the players. Because if you pick a captain that isn't influential, that the players haven't picked, then they're not going to make any impact at all in terms of leading the group and making the changes that you actually want to see. Why it doesn't work though is because then you're giving players full control. You're really losing out on the ability to manipulate the environment within the team, and that is ultimately what the manager's job is, to subtly manipulate the hierarchy and the situation around the team, not telling a team what to do and how to be, but picking a captain that has those values within them that then can be taught from within the team. The players can ultimately pick anyone, and they could ultimately pick someone that maybe doesn't align with the manager and the coaching staff. And for cohesion and hierarchy throughout the entire club, that's not going to be a good thing. I think that a manager should decide who the captain is, but that decision should be informed by knowing who the 4 or 5 influential players are within the team. I think there's a balance between the two. A lot of people say, let the players decide. A lot of people say, let the manager decide. There's that middle ground there that encapsulates the strengths of both, really. Another factor to consider, though, is that a manager should really know the values and the standards that he or she wants within the team before then picking that captain, because that captain should reflect exactly what that manager wants to see really throughout the entire team. Because a captain is nothing really without those consistent standards, ones shared by the manager and the coaching staff. And inconsistency in that means that really there's no leadership at all. That when a minority influence is actually influential, and this is what research has shown, is when they are consistent in their messaging. And that is really important for a manager, a coach, a captain, to have those set values, those standards, and to communicate them consistently, both in words and in actions also. Overall, there's a lot in there, to be fair. Captains are important because through conformity and influence, they determine the behaviour of the whole team, but also bring that line of communication. So there's always one direct message, and the team as a whole, they act as one. Through the captain, everyone acts out what we talked about there, the agreed values and the standards. Within that, the ideal captain is very much what you know it to be. You know, the humble, the communicative, the hardworking, the influential person amongst everybody else. Ultimately, a manager should be asking what traits would he or she like to see throughout the whole team? What really reflects their values and that of the team? And that is ultimately what should be guiding a manager's choice. So picking your captain really means 3 things. So 1, knowing the values and the standards that you want in the team. Can you sum that up in 3 or 4 words or know exactly what that is? The second is assessing the influence through observation or otherwise that players have and finding the 4 or 5 that hold that influence, that are the top influential players. And the third is to choose one of those 4 or 5 that reflect the values of the team and what you'd like to see throughout every player. That's really everything from me this episode. There is one thing I want to add at the end. I was thinking, and I really enjoy doing FPL and things like that, and just as well as talking about psychology and more serious stuff, I could like to do some fun stuff as well, and starting a fantasy league and getting people that are watching this and listening to this on board with that and talking about that alongside talking about more psychological things and more serious football things. I think it would be, I don't know, I enjoy doing that. I don't know if other people enjoy doing that, so I'm bringing it up awkwardly at the end of this episode to see if people would actually want to do it. So, I mean, comment or whatever if you would like to do it, and then I'll try and set it up properly. If not, whatever, I'll just do it by myself. But I think that would be a fun thing to do and to talk about alongside talking about everything else that's going on. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you for watching and listening as always. And I might do another episode this week. I'm not sure. It might end up being Wednesdays and Fridays. I don't know. Maybe I might be busy. But yeah, if I don't see you Friday, I'll see you next week.